It's more than just the Bidens, but let's focus on them for a minute because you detailed much of the Biden family's financial dealings overseas, including but not limited to China, in your book Secret Empires, which was excellent. If people haven't read that, you have to read that. It's a good primer for this. So what is new here that you're detailing with respect to Biden and their financial ties to the Chinese communists?
That's a great question. We first broke the story about the Biden's commercial ties to China in 2018 in Secret Empires. There's new evidence that emerged. One of those is the Hunter Biden laptop. Another would be the emails that we got from one of Hunter Biden's business partners, Bevan Cooney, who shared his Gmail account. And what we really wanted to answer the question was, you know, the Bidens got all these commercial deals in China. Who made those deals happen? Or as my kids would say, who made it rain? And what we found by going through the laptops and going through the emails is that the Bidens received some $31 million in deals. This was through Hunter Biden. But that each and every one of those deals, and we lay them out in detail in the book and we name names, each and every one of those deals was put together by a businessman who has ties to the highest levels of Chinese intelligence. And so this is no longer a story of corruption, self-dealing, cronyism. We have to realize that this is now a story about intelligence. It could be a story about espionage. It could be a story about leverage. And we have to start investigating and determining whether the first family is potentially compromised, because Chinese intelligence services are not going to undertake such an operation without expecting some things in return.
And we know from back before the election, another former Hunter Biden business partner, Tony Bobulinski, that the big guy was cut in on some of this action, the big guy being Joe Biden. And so with this $31 million worth of deals that you're referencing, do we see the big guy involved in this as well, involved in these other deals?
Absolutely. A great question. The other big revelation in the book is we demonstrate that Hunter Biden was subsidizing his father's lifestyle. He was actually paying his bills while he was vice president of the United States, and it could have gone on longer. We found tens of thousands of dollars of that. There was certainly more. We just got a snapshot of it in the emails. But it's important to point out that, first of all, this is not legal. It's not legal for a politician to have their lifestyle subsidized by a family member. A family member can buy them occasional gifts. They cannot pay recurring bills, which is one of the things that is revealed in the book. The second problem, though, is that it shows that Joe Biden and other family members benefited. This was not just Hunter Biden collecting this money and spending this money on bad habits or whatever. We know that James Biden, Joe Biden's brother, received at least $2 million from these Chinese deals. We know that Joe Biden's lifestyle was subsidized, and Hunter Biden has complained about this. He complained to family members in one text that, he was required to give half his money to Pops, which is his dad. So this is a story of what I would call offshoring corruption. Joe Biden didn't receive money, and he can continue to insist that he didn't receive money from China, but he received money from his son, who received money from China in deals overseas. That's the relevant point.
And it's so strange because when I read parts of your book, when Hunter Biden went to China, he asked his Secret Service detail to stay home. Was that to do drugs or was that to do business?
Yeah, we don't know, but it is enormously troubling because businessmen that travel to China, whether they're investment bankers or whatever, will tell you you have to be on guard for security reasons there. Your hotel room can be bugged. You have to worry about honeypots. But Hunter Biden goes to China. He secures these deals. And then in the summer of 2014, he goes to the Secret Service and says, I do not want protection when I travel overseas. That's a pretty stunning thing. Is that he doesn't want them to know about his drug use? Perhaps. That's certainly a factor. But the fact is we do know that based on the emails, on future trips in the United States and in some occasions to Europe, he does want the Secret Service involved, and there's communication there. But when it comes to trips to China, there is no future trips that he takes where the Secret Service is present. And anyone that will tell you, anyone who has been in the space of working for the Secret Service or dealing with the Secret Services, that is a huge, huge, huge red flag.
You know, the Joe Biden piece of this, it sounds like something very similar to what we had in Illinois when George Ryan, the former Republican governor at the end of last century into the beginning of this one, was indicted and convicted and sent away for corruption charges, and never received any cash. But, you know, it was one of those things wherever George Ryan did, he never paid. Wherever George Ryan went, he never paid for anything. In this case, it wasn't family members per se. It was donors, a trip to Costa Rica, or this or that. You know, it's one of those situations where I don't have any money, but every time I reach into my pocket, money's there. And it was not very sophisticated. It wasn't so sophisticated that Patrick Fitzgerald, the U.S. attorney at the time, couldn't figure it out and put a governor in jail. It sounds like this is what was happening with Joe Biden.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And it's important to point out here that, you know, the relationship that China has, I mean, I talk about other people in the book besides the Bidens. You know, what are they looking for? When they forge these commercial ties, what are they looking for? They're not expecting that a political figure like Joe Biden is going to walk in lockstep with them and praise them as some paradise. The strategy really is loosely translated to the English is they want big help with a little bad mouth. And what that means is, you know, Joe Biden can mention human rights, he can mention the Uyghurs, and he kind of has to do that just to you know, demonstrate his independence. But the fact is they want help on the things that matter most to them, which is unfettered access to our capital markets and unfettered access to our technology. Because as I lay out in the book, President Xi has said explicitly that there is a war to win the technology race, and whoever wins that race is going to reign supreme on the globe. And they believe, and I think it's true, that if they are allowed to continue to have this access to capital and technology, they will win the competition. So the stakes are very, very high, and Beijing is quite confident that they are going to be in the driver's seat here going forward.
Well, what about the information from your book? Can you take it to authorities for prosecution or do anything with this vital information?
Well, that certainly is the hope. I know that yesterday Congressman McCarthy from California came out and said that if Republicans retake the House, there's going to be a congressional investigation relating to the Bidens and the family, which I think is good. But, you know, honestly, I think part of the problem is I highlight some Republicans in the book, senior Republicans who have their commercial deals with China. And what you have is sort of this mutual non-aggression pact. I mean, you know, Mitch McConnell's in the book. Mitch McConnell does not want to have a conversation about Chinese commercial ties and the leverage that it affords over our politicians, because then the conversation would turn to him. So this is a big problem. And I also think that our law enforcement agencies, oftentimes, not always, we certainly saw during the Trump administration their willingness, but they are often very reluctant to investigate and go after senior political figures, especially those like Joe Biden, who is now the most powerful man in the world. So we need to continue to expose it, and we need to hope that we're going to get the kind of investigation. I mean, I don't know if this is, going to lead to prosecutions, but the American people need to know what exactly happened and what is Beijing getting for that money.
Well, right, and you mentioned 24 former legislators who are lobbyists for China in some material way, Chinese business interests, which is to say Chinese communist business interests. And they include former House Speaker John Boehner, who still holds a lot of sway on the Hill, and Trent Lott. And others, mostly Republicans in that cadre of 24 or 23 lobbyists. And so you have this issue. Maybe they didn't do anything technically illegal, but maybe if we knew everything that they were doing on behalf of Chinese communist business interests, we changed the law. And so it is a bipartisan issue that you're raising.
Exactly. I mean, in the case of those lobbyists, they're not only lobbying for Chinese companies, they are lobbying for companies that are linked to either the Chinese military or the Chinese intelligence service, meaning these are companies that produce surveillance technologies for the Ministry of State Security. They produce weapon systems or logistical components for the Chinese military. And we've got former members of Congress that are lobbying on their behalf in Washington. My view is the Constitution grants us the right to petition the government, which essentially in this day and age means lobbying. I don't see anything in the Constitution that allows an adversarial power to hire former retired politicians to lobby on their behalf. That ought to be banned. And look, there's going to be a lot of squealing about that in Washington, D.C. Some of these people are making $1 million or more a year just off of one lobbying contract for these Chinese firms. But to me, that is a starting point. And there are a number of other reforms that I propose in the book as well.
Yeah,
well, what about
John Boehner's got to afford that nice condo he's got in Marco Island.
And Mitch McConnell and his wife with the shipping business. I mean, you in your book you discussed a meeting. Mitch McConnell went with his father-in-law over to China, and next thing you know, they had a small shipping business, and then the government's building big barges for them.
That's right. The Chinese government is building these massive bulk container ships for them. They're financing, the state banks are financing the construction of those ships to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. The crews that man their ships are provided by the Chinese government, and the contracts. Many of the goods that they're shipping around Asia that they're making so much money on are goods from Chinese state-owned factories. And so the reality is that Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, if he were to do something to really anger Beijing, like take a hard line on issues related to capital or related to access to technology, China could literally destroy the family business overnight. And that's exactly the kind of relationship that Beijing wants. They want leverage over American politicians, and they have it.
Why China? Is it just hubris? I mean, why not go, if you're going to try to leverage your political clout and your official positions in this country, why not go to countries that are sort of below the fold to make your millions? Why China?
It's a great question. I think it's, what was the old thing the bank robber said when he was asked why he robbed banks? Yeah, Willie Sutton. He robbed it because that's where the money was. China is a massive, wealthy, expanding market, and they are carrying out a strategy that Vladimir Lenin, the old Soviet leader, said, that we're going to get the capitalists to sell us the rope by which we will hang them. Well, the Soviet Union didn't have many rubles to rub together, and nobody wanted rubles. But China is a increasingly prosperous, powerful country. It's going to be the world's largest economy here soon enough. And they've had a concerted strategy. They call it elite capture. And it's genius if you think about it. They don't want to go toe-to-toe with the United States. So what they want to do is effectively lobotomize us by buying off or capturing our elite and making them less hostile, less willing to stand up to China. And that strategy is working fabulously. It's a huge problem. And if we don't wake up, realize it's a bipartisan problem, and enact some reforms, it will be too late, and we will lose this vital competition that we need to win.
You know what's telling about your books, too, Clinton Cash, Secret Empires, now this one, Red-Handed, is nobody challenges the content. They just ignore you. They try to ignore you. And that is very, very telling when they're not trying to suggest, well, Peter Schweizer is not documenting this or Peter Schweizer's wrong about that. I don't hear any of that. I just hear silence from sort of the D.C. press corps and the political class, which, as I said, is very instructive. Peter Schweizer, he's the president of the Government Accountability Institute, New York Times bestselling author of most recently, pick it up if you haven't, Red-Handed, How American Elites Get Rich Helping China Win. Peter, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.